Welcome to the third video in this series. In the previous two episodes, we examined why Kitab Sulaym cannot be treated as a reliable source for early Islamic history, and we also presented the narrative it contains regarding the events that followed the Prophet's passing. If you haven't watched those episodes yet, we recommend doing so. The links are available in the description. In this episode, we will take the discussion further by turning to some of the earliest historical sources and examining what they record about the events of Saqifa, particularly how these events relate to Ali and his household. Before doing so, it is important to clarify a common misconception. Contrary to popular belief, there is no such thing as a neatly separated Shia history versus Sunni history. The way early Muslims wrote history does not fit the modern sectarian labels we project onto them. Historical works from that era function much like modern films based on true events. Just as filmmakers dramatize scenes for rhetorical or emotional effect, without seeing it as a betrayal of the underlying story, early historians often expanded, stylized, or embellished the core narrative they inherited. This embellishment was not necessarily malicious, nor was it intended to deceive. They worked with a shared minimal storyline and then layered their own interpretations, preferences, and narrative flourishes onto it. Some editions appear Shia-leaning, others Sunni-leaning, and many texts contain both tendencies at once. The modern reader is used to neatly filtered sect-specific histories, but the ancient authors themselves were far more fluid, and they are frequently accused by Shia of being Sunni and by Sunnis of being Shia, depending on which part of their work one is reading. This is a vast topic in itself, one that is rarely, if ever, studied or formally examined within Islamic seminaries, for obvious reasons. However, some contemporary scholars and academics have attempted to address what it actually meant to write history in the early Islamic period. Notable among them are Hossein Modarresi, Najam Haider, and others, whose works explore these questions in academic detail. This broader issue is not the focus of our discussion today, but providing this background helps us understand how to identify a common, minimalist storyline, the core narrative around which early Islamic historians built their accounts. This table lists key authors in early Islamic historiography. After Kitab Sulaym, Tariq al-Yaqubi is the earliest Shia-leaning historical source for the event of Saqifa and its immediate aftermath. What al-Yaqubi preserves is especially important for our discussion, because his work reflects a perspective that is openly sympathetic to the Shia and consistently attentive to the experiences and viewpoints of the Prophet's family. It should also be noted that al-Yaqubi's narrative style is highly free-flowing. He recounts events in extended form without providing chains of transmission, and anyone familiar with hadith sciences will recognize that his reports cannot be treated as verbatim records. Yet despite this, his chronicle remains historically valuable. A comparison between al-Yaqubi's record and parallel accounts transmitted across different historical periods offers important insight into the development and transformation of specific narratives. Al-Yaqubi records the following account. Abu Bakr and Umar heard that a group of migrants and supporters had gathered with Ali ibn Abi Talib at the house of Fatima, daughter of the Messenger of Allah, so they came together and attacked the house. Ali came out with his sword, and Umar met him and wrestled with him, knocking him down and breaking his sword. They entered the house, and Fatima came out and said, "By God, either you leave, or I will uncover my hair and appeal to God." So they left, and everyone who was in the house left, and the people stayed for several days. Then one by one they pledged allegiance, and Ali did not pledge allegiance until 6 months later, or 40 days, according to some accounts. This account aligns with Sulaym's narrative in portraying a tense and ugly confrontation at the house of Fatima, yet it diverges from him significantly in describing how the situation was quickly diffused through Fatima al-Zahra's intervention. It also makes clear that Ali delayed giving the bay'ah, a notable departure from the far more dramatic version found in Sulaym's book. Just as importantly, al-Yaqubi makes no mention whatsoever of several elements that appear prominently in Sulaym's narrative, such as Ali taking his family to people's homes, asking for support, any physical attack on Lady Fatima, a rope being placed around Ali's neck, or a forced bay'ah. Let us keep these details in mind as we now turn to another major historical source, Tariq al-Tabari. This work is arguably one of the most important and comprehensive compilations on early Islamic history. What makes al-Tabari particularly remarkable is that, although he is a Sunni historian, he draws from a wide range of sources, including Shia-leaning traditions. He also frequently records multiple, even contradictory accounts of the same event, each with its own chain of transmission, and he does so without attempting to reconcile them or impose his own judgment. Tabari records the following report regarding the confrontation at the house of Lady Fatima. Umar came to the house of Ali, where Talha, Zubair, and a group of the Muhajirin were present. He said, "By God, I will burn it down over you, unless you come out to give the pledge." Zubair came out against him with his sword drawn, but he stumbled and the sword fell from his hand, so they rushed upon him and seized him. This report closely resembles what al-Qubi narrates, with the notable addition of an explicit threat to burn the house. Many Shia writers cite this statement as proof that the full narrative found in Kitab Sulaym, including a violent assault on Lady Fatima, must therefore be historically accurate. However, this argument does not hold. First, a threat does not establish that the threatened action was carried out. At most, the narration records words spoken in a moment of confrontation, not the execution of those words. Second, such language does not necessarily need to be understood literally. In classical Arabic usage, it was common to employ extreme or violent expressions rhetorically as a form of intimidation or emphasis rather than as a statement of intended action. Examples of this style can be found abundantly in the Quran and the hadith corpus. We can potentially observe this very phenomenon in al-Yaqubi's own account, where Lady Fatima is reported to have threatened to uncover her hair and pray against those present. It would be unreasonable to assume that these words were meant to be taken literally or that they necessarily reflect her exact phrasing. Rather, they function as a powerful rhetorical expression of protest. The same reasoning could apply to Umar's reported threat to burn the house. In short, even if this report were accepted as authentic, it fails to corroborate the specific claims found in Kitab Sulaym regarding physical assaults at the house of Lady Fatima. At most, it confirms the presence of tension and confrontation, not the dramatic sequence of events described in that work. Moving on from these two reports, we find that later authors record a large variety of versions of the same event. Sunni sources often confirm a confrontation and a threat to burn the house. Some also mention that firewood was brought, though an actual physical assault is not mentioned. Shia sources offer various flavors, often with independent chains. One such account worth mentioning is found in a book called Al-Ikhtisas, often attributed to Sheikh al-Mufid. There is substantial scholarly disagreement over the authorship of this book, with as many as 4 or 5 competing views. Some scholars maintain that al-Mufid is indeed the author, while others attribute it to different figures or regard the author as unknown altogether. Each side advances its own arguments. We will not rehearse this debate here. It is sufficient to note that such deep and unresolved disagreement over authorship necessarily weakens the historical reliability of the material contained in the work, especially when it is used to support highly consequential claims. A group of prominent men went to Ali's house, forced their way inside, and took him out against his will toward the Saqifa. Fatima confronted them and protested strongly, warning that she would go to her father's grave and publicly call upon God if they did not stop. As she began to leave with Hassan and Hussein, Ali asked Salman al-Farsi to intervene. Salman caught up with her and urged her to return, reminding her that God had sent her father as a mercy and warning that serious consequences could fall upon Medina if she continued. When Salman told her that Ali himself had asked her to return, she agreed and went back home. During these events, Zubair tried to defend Ali by drawing his sword, but he was quickly overpowered and disarmed. Ali was then taken to the Saqifa, where he was pressured to give allegiance and threatened with death if he refused. Ibn Abbas stepped in to prevent further escalation and arranged a symbolic pledge by placing Ali's hand over Abu Bakr's hand. Ali left in anger, turning to God in prayer and recalling the Prophet's words that resistance was only justified if enough supporters were present. He concluded that such support did not exist at that time. Certain parallels can be observed between this account and the version narrated in Kitab Sulaym. Yet despite these similarities, the two narratives, both emotionally charged and focused on Lady Fatima's anger and mistreatment ultimately stand in clear tension with one another. Most notably, the later report makes no reference to the use of fire or to any direct physical assault on Lady Fatima, even though Kunfud is explicitly named as a participant in the events. More broadly, the narration suffers from internal difficulties. The portrayal of Salman al-Farsi attempting to counsel Lady Fatima by reminding her of her father's mission is particularly problematic. Lady Fatima is not a figure in need of moral or spiritual instruction from ordinary folk. Rather, she is herself a source of guidance for the masses. Similarly, the role attributed to Ibn Abbas is hard to reconcile with the gravity of the situation as well as the status and role of Imam Ali. The act of forcibly placing Imam Ali's hand onto that of Abu Bakr raises fundamental questions about the validity of the act itself. Can such coercion meaningfully constitute a bay'ah at all? In summary, the version presented in al-Ikhtisas is faced by problems at multiple levels: its source, its content, and its clear contradiction with other reports. For these reasons, accepting this narration at face value becomes highly problematic. At this point, it is important to pause and take stock of where the evidence has led us. Based on the earliest historical sources and a careful comparison of their accounts, our view is that while a tense and unpleasant confrontation did occur, the specific claim of a violent physical attack on Lady Fatima cannot be established with historical confidence. What we consistently see instead is escalation, pressure, and conflict, followed by diffusion and restraint, not the dramatic sequence later sources describe. This naturally raises a larger question. How should we understand the reports that are claimed to be independent of Kitab Sulaym and are used by the Shia as evidence for an assault? Our short answer is this: we regard all such reports as fabrications. While this conclusion may initially appear far-fetched, it becomes far less surprising when examined within the broader context of the hadith corpus. Let us discuss this important issue in detail. We will present this discussion in points. Number 1. General skepticism toward the hadith corpus. We adopt a generally skeptical position toward the hadith corpus as a whole. In this regard, we align with the approaches of scholars such as Bakir al-Bahbudi, Asif Mohseni, and Kamal al-Haidari. Their research shows that a large portion of Shia narrations cannot be considered reliable even at the level of chain analysis, before questions of content, coherence, or historical plausibility are addressed. Number 2. Fabrication multiplies details, but fails to produce coherent history. Individual narrations are easy to invent, but fabricating a believable alternate history is extremely difficult. Real history imposes constraints. Individuals react to their knowledge, beliefs, and environments. Actions lead to reactions and consequences. Events do not transpire in a vacuum. They can be traced through what came before them and leave a mark on what follows. Fabrications give themselves away by failing to respect these constraints. Both the Shia and Sunni hadith collections contain many such examples, and in our view, the assault narrative concerning Lady Fatima is one of them. Consider these contradictions. Multiple reliable reports state that Lady Fatima passed away following illness after the Prophet's death, yet other narrations attribute her death to severe physical injuries. Some portray her as bedridden and incapacitated, while other well-known accounts describe her later appearing publicly to deliver a powerful sermon in the mosque. Some imply a violent assault in the presence of Imam Ali and multiple other men, yet provide no plausible explanation for the absence of an immediate reaction or even a delayed response. Others implicitly place responsibility for her and her unborn child's death on Umar, yet preserve no record of legal retaliation, compensation, or formal accusation by Imam Ali. These tensions indicate that the assault elements are later additions layered onto an already painful historical reality. The only explanation commonly offered to resolve these contradictions is that Imam Ali deliberately exercised restraint for the protection of Islam. While this reasoning may explain why Imam Ali did not persist in publicly contesting leadership after the initial period, it fails to address the other contradictions we have identified. Number 3. Polemical expansion in emotionally charged contexts. The period following the Prophet's death was marked by grief, political conflict, and moral outrage. The dispute over leadership, the issue of Fadak, Lady Fatima's protests, and her displeasure with political authority are historically grounded realities. Such conditions naturally give rise to polemical expansion, where real injustice becomes increasingly dramatized through later elaboration. Number 4. Collapse of chains of transmission. The assault narrations fail under isna'ad scrutiny. For example, Bihar al-Anwar contains more than 50 reports concerning the calamity of Lady Fatima. Asif Mohseni considers only 3 of these to have acceptable chains of transmission, and none of them mention a physical assault. When reports central to a major historical claim repeatedly fail basic chain analysis, confidence in that claim collapses. Number 5. Extreme internal inconsistency. A genuine public event witnessed by many people would be expected to produce a relatively stable core narrative. Instead, the assault narrations display wide variation, contradictory details, and incompatible sequences of events. This pattern is characteristic of fabricated traditions, where variation increases precisely because there is no underlying, solid historical core. Finally, it is important to emphasize that we are not a rare or isolated voice in questioning the assault narrative. Among the most prominent and outspoken scholars to do so was Sayyid Muhammad Hussein Fadlallah, who addressed this issue openly and at length. Some argue that he represents an outlier position, heavily outnumbered by senior scholars who accept a common narrative. In one sense, this is true. However, holding a minority position does not in itself indicate falsehood, a point that Shia themselves have historically emphasized in other contexts. Moreover, Sayyid Fadlallah was a reformist scholar, and by definition, reformists stand outside the prevailing norm. To challenge long-rooted assumptions is to stand against the majority opinion, since the norm is defined by what most people already accept. Being an outlier, therefore, does not invalidate an argument. It is often a prerequisite for meaningful reform. Finally, we believe that there exists a far larger number of researchers and scholars who share these reservations than is publicly apparent. Many choose not to express such views openly or explicitly for reasons that are obvious. Silence in this context should not be mistaken for overwhelming consensus. At this point, it would be both incorrect and unfair to conclude this discussion without acknowledging the authentic narrations concerning the hardships and calamities that befell Lady Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet, a truly exceptional and often misunderstood figure. These reports deserve careful attention and serious reflection. In the next and final video of this series, we will turn to these narrations directly in an episode titled The True Musibah of the Lady of Light. Thank you for watching.